You can have that hellhole, Gregory sneered, shoving the deed into Marcia's hands as his mistress smirked. Cameras caught the cruel dismissal, whispers spreading. She'd been tossed aside with nothing but a rotting house. But months later, the same broken floorboards that mocked her began to whisper secrets of their own. Dusty panels, hidden chests, papers stamped with crests no one remembered. Now Gregory's empire was crumbling. Debts clawing at his heels, while rumors swirled that Marcia had found something far greater than anyone imagined. And when he finally stumbled back to her, hollow-eyed and begging, she only smiled. What was buried in that worthless farmhouse? And why did it leave him on his knees? Before we go any further, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to us, and it helps us bring you even more powerful stories. Now let's begin. He said it like a joke. You can have the farmhouse. The hell is all you're getting. Marcia Bennett kept her hands steady on the thick manila envelope. Inside, the deed rasped against paper like dry leaves. She inhaled through her nose and caught the mix of copier toner, perfume, and rain from the lobby rug. Gregory's new mistress shifted her weight, smoothing a silk dress, eyes glittering as if she owned the air. People looked over from leather chairs. Someone whispered, "Is that the wife?" Another voice amused. He moved on fast, phones angled just enough to pretend they weren't recording. Marcia glanced at her kids, waiting by the glass doors. Lee hugged her backpack to her chest. Caleb traced fog shapes on the pane and drew a smiley face that drooped as it slid. Marshall lifted a hand to calm them and felt her pulse at the base of her throat. She tucked a stray braid behind her ear, squared her shoulders, and faced Gregory. He leaned in until she could see the shaved line under his jaw. "I signed it. That land is worthless. Be practical for once." He laughed again, a bright little sound that bounced off marble and stung. Worthless, the word pressed on her ribs. She had packed orders on the floor of their first apartment while he slept in the office. She had figured out vendors when his voice shook. She had said keep going when their account showed 2 digits. Her palm warmed the envelope, not nothing. The paralegal cleared her throat. Both parties have acknowledged the transfer. The stapler clicked. The room felt colder. Gregory stepped back to the mistress, slipping an arm around her waist like he had just won a prize. The woman tilted her head at Marcia's clothes, at the scuffed heel, at the rain mark creeping up her skirt. "You'll be fine," she said, sweet as a sick cough. "Country life might suit you." Marcia smiled, small and tight, the kind that hit a cracked tooth of hurt. "Thank you for your generosity." She said it soft, and the words landed like a needle. Gregory blinked, confused that she had not shattered. Outside, wind pulled at the revolving door, and the city smelled of wet concrete and hot brakes. Marcia gathered the kids. Lee's fingers were cold in her hand. Caleb peered up. "Do we have to live there, Mom?" His voice trembled but stood. "We have a key," Marca said, tapping the envelope. "A front door, a roof, and space to start over. We'll make it work." She wanted her voice level, so she let herself breathe through the count of 4. In, hold, out. Behind them, the whisperers kept whispering. A woman near the elevator murmured, "He gave her the family land. That's cruel." A man chuckled. "Cheaper than alimony." Marcia turned once just to look. Gregory watched the mistress take a selfie, lips pouty, his smile at half power. He noticed Marcia's look and tossed a little shrug. The shrug said you lost. The shrug said you're finished. She pressed the envelope against her chest and felt the corners bite. Good pain meant she was still here. She nudged the door with her shoulder, guiding the kids into the rain, and told herself a quiet truth she had learned on lean nights. People can hand you scraps. You decide if they become rags or a flag. At the curb, she raised her arm for a cab. Her hand shook just once, then it steadied. The deed rustled like a promise trying to wake. The farmhouse sat at the end of a dirt lane, shouldered by maples that hunched like tired guards. Paint curled from a siding in pale strips. A loose shutter clapped twice in the wind and went still. When Marka turned the key, the door stuck, then gave with a sigh and a dust smell that tasted like old books and rain. The living room floors bowed near the hearth. A broken clock on a mantel showed 412 forever. She set the manila envelope beside it, smoothing the creased flap with 2 fingers. Lee sneezed. Caleb toed a fallen nail with his sneaker and kept his foot there as if pinning the house down. They worked until the light thinned. Marka opened windows that complained in their frames. She shook out mouse droppings from a drawer, gagged, then laughed through it anyway. "We'll need gloves," she said, voice steady by choice. Caleb dragged him up taller than he was, banging each doorway like a drum. Lee lined up 3 chip plates and wiped each one until the grime gave up. At night, they slept close on the floor, wrapped in 2 blankets that smelled faintly of laundry soap from the old apartment. The country quiet pressed too hard, then softened. A cricket insisted on itself. Somewhere the wind combed a field. Marshall listened for leaks and lies. She pulled the deed from the envelope and read the stamp by phone light. Legal truth at least, her name, her land. Morning brought small insults, the well-pumped cough sand. The second step bit her ankle. A cabinet hinge snapped like a cheap secret. She swore under her breath, then kissed her teeth and tied her scarf tighter. At the hardware store in town, the bell on the door rang too cheerfully. Eyes turned. A clerk with a name tag that said Rose studied Marcia's list in her hands. "You are in the Bennett place," Rose said like a test. "For now," Marcia answered. "People say it soaks money." Rose said, "People say a lot of things." Marcia nodded once, "Then we will wring it dry." The clerk blinked, then started loading caulk and screws, and a stubborn little saw onto the counter. Outside a truck idled. 2 men watched her lift the supplies. One said not quietly, "He did her wrong." The other leaned back, "She will sell and crawl back." Marcia strapped the box to the back seat and met their eyes just long enough. The men looked away first. They fell into a rhythm. Mornings of patching, afternoons of scraping, evenings of ramen with pepper, and a wedge of apple divided into 3 perfect thins. Marcia's hands cracked near the knuckles. She kept lotion in her pocket like a secret. Lee hummed softly when she worked, a low note that steadied the room. Caleb found a Denton soldier under the parlor rug and stood it on the windowsill like a guard. The mistress came once in a silver car that whispered over the lane. She did a slow roll-by with sunglasses on. Phone lifted, the lens flashed, Caleb stiffened. Marcia raised a hand, palm out, and turned back to her ladder. The message was simple. "We are busy." Some nights the house talked. Boards clicked as they cooled. There was a draft that felt like a whisper across the kitchen floor. A thin line of cold that did not match the weather. Marcia traced it with her toes to a corner where the baseboard buckled. She pressed her thumb against one seam and felt give. Not yet, she told herself. Roof first, water first. Still, the thought perched in her ribs. She wanted safety for the kids and some small proof that she had not misread her life. The obstacles lined up: money, time, tired bones, the well that coughed. Therefore, she traded sleep for lists and taught Lee how to reseat a hinge and showed Caleb how to crack walnuts with a hammer without smashing his thumb. It was clumsy. It was theirs. On day 14, a storm stalked the fields and the sky went green-gray. Rain hit the roof like coins. The loose shutter hammered once, twice, then snapped free and vanished into the dark. In the living room, the ceiling bulged at one seam. Marcia stood under it, breath-tight. A drop formed, fattened, fell, then another. She grabbed a bucket, centered it, and listened to the slow metallic ping that marked a new expense. Lee pressed her shoulder against Marcia's arm. "We can sell the old bike." And my art said, "No." Marca said, "We will sell what is not us. They ate by lamplight. Steam rose from bowls. A small weight took its hand off her chest. The deed lay on the mantel where she had left it, edges curling slightly in the damp. Caleb watched it, then the bulge in the ceiling. Then his mother, he whispered, "This place is testing us, it is. Marka said we are passing." Later, when the kids slept, she walked the floor with bare feet, following that thread of cold again. One that cut across the kitchen. At the corner she crouched. The baseboard lifted a breath. Her fingers shook as she tested the seam. She stopped, closed her eyes, and smiled at nothing. Patience. The house had something to say. It would say it when she could listen without breaking. The storm passed, leaving behind a silence too sharp, as though the land itself was holding its breath. Marcia stepped into the kitchen barefoot, floorboards cool beneath her soles. She followed that line of chill again, the seam where the baseboard bulged just slightly out of place. She crouched, pressing her palm against it. The wood groaned, brittle, giving way like it had been waiting decades to be touched. She tugged, and the panel lifted. Dust spilled into the air, dry and metallic, coating her tongue. Caleb patted in, rubbing his eyes. "Mom, what are you doing?" Marshall lifted a finger to hush him, her eyes fixed on the dark hollow, now open in the wall. She reached inside, fingertips brushing against something hard, something cold. When she pulled it out, the weight nearly dragged her wrist. It was a small iron box, rust biting its edges. She exhaled, steadying her breath, then set it on the table. Lee had joined silent, her braid hanging loose against one shoulder. The children leaned close as Marka found the latch. It resisted at first, screeching, then popped. Inside, layered in a rotted cloth, were coins, gold, dulled with time but unmistakable. Alongside them lay folded papers, the ink faded but neat, sealed with brittle wax stamps that still bore a family crest. Caleb let out a whistle before clapping a hand over his mouth. Lee's hand flew to her chest. Marcia touched one coin, rolling its edge between thumb and forefinger. Heat rushed through her palms. Not the heat of greed, but of recognition. This wasn't junk. This was history. The documents revealed deeds, titles, and contracts, proof that Gregory's family had once traded in land and livestock across the county, passing fortunes in silence. It seemed someone had hidden the valuables generations ago, forgotten by time, lost when a farmhouse fell into ruin. Marceline back in the chair, heartbeat hammering. Her husband had mocked this land, called it worthless, shoved it into her hands just to be rid of her. Yet here was proof. The earth beneath her feet carried more legacy than all the glass towers Gregory bragged about. Still, she did not tell the children everything that night. She let them marvel at the coins, let Caleb line them up into shaky towers, let Lee whisper, "It's like treasure maps and books. Keep this between us," Marka said softly. "Some things need quiet before they speak loud." The next days blurred into research. Marcia carried the documents carefully in cloth, her fingers trembling each time she unfolded them. At the county archive, an older clerk adjusted her glasses, looked at the signatures, and blinked. "Where did you find these?" she asked, voice hushed. Marcia only smiled. "In my house." The clerk whistled low. "This isn't just property. These are historical assets." Museums would pay collectors, too. That night, Marcia sat by the weak fire, paper spread across her lap. Her children drowsed against her shoulders. She whispered to herself, "Worthless," he said. Worthless. The word turned sweet as honey. Slowly, she began selling pieces, an auction for the coins, a private sale of certain antiques. Each transaction carried out with patience. She didn't boast. She didn't even buy new clothes at first. She simply replaced the leaking roof, restored the floors, fixed the windows so the night air no longer crept, and like an unwelcome guest. Whispers stirred in town. At the grocery, someone muttered, "She's fixing the Bennett place." Another replied, "With what money?" Rumors bloomed, inheritance, secret investors, a stroke of luck. No one guessed the truth. The mistress drove by again one afternoon. She slowed, eyes behind her shades flicking across the new paint, the repaired shutters, the swing Caleb had built from a tire. Her lips parted, just slightly in disbelief. She didn't stop, didn't wave. She pressed harder on the gas and vanished. Marsh stood on the porch, arms folded, watching her tail lights disappear. She felt no need to gloat. The farmhouse itself was doing the talking, and beneath her calm, one thought pulsed steady. The land Gregory tossed away was becoming the ground on which her children would stand tall. What he had mocked as her end was only her beginning. The treasure was no miracle. It was proof that resilience could turn insult into inheritance, and proof that his arrogance had blinded him to the very soil under his name. But while Marshall rose, Gregory's world was beginning to crack. Gregory's empire began to unravel the waste silk phrase. One small snag at first, then everything unraveling in threads he couldn't hold together. It started with a deal that soured. A partner pulled out, claiming lack of trust. Then came the lawsuits, whispers of unpaid debts, and investors demanding returns he couldn't produce. He told himself it was just a rough patch, but when the bank froze his credit line, he felt the walls closing in. At a dinner once reserved for the city's elite, Gregory reached for a glass of wine, only to notice the hush that followed him. People turned away just a breath too quickly. His mistress leaned closer, her perfume clawing. "They say you're finished," she murmured, voice dripping with pity disguised as curiosity. He laughed too loudly, sound brittle. Cracking mid-note. "Rumors," he said, but when the bill came his card was declined, eyes darted, someone snickered. Gregory's throat tightened as he fumbled for another card, declined again. Mistress excused herself for the restroom and never returned. By week's end, she had packed her things and moved in with a lawyer 10 years younger, her goodbye note written on the back of a receipt. "I can't sync with you," it said. No signature, no warmth. Gregory tried to call, no answer. At the same time, news rippled through the county. The abandoned Bennett farmhouse, once the family's shame, was rising again. New windows glended in the sun. Fresh paint brightened the frame. At the farmer's market, someone whispered, "That woman, Marcia, she's doing it." Another voice added, "She bought the Henderson estate last week. Cash." Gregory overheard in line for coffee. He spilled sugar packets across the counter, hands trembling, face hot. "Impossible," he muttered, yet the words clung like burrs. Curiosity drove him to the farmhouse one evening. He parked far down the lane and walked, shoes crunching gravel. The house stood proud now, no longer sagging into itself. Curtains glowed softly in the windows. He saw Caleb's silhouette dart past with a flashlight, Lee's laughter rising like a bell. On the porch sat Marcia, calm, a book in hand. She looked up once, straight at him in the dim. For a moment, he felt 12 years old, caught stealing from his father's cabinet. He turned on his heel and fled, chest tight. Back in the city, creditors circled like vultures. A former business partner cornered him in the lobby of a hotel. "You gambled everything," the man spat. "Now you pay." Gregory tried to argue, but the man's voice rose, drawing stares. Phones lifted to record. "Fraud," someone hissed. The shame went viral overnight. Meanwhile, Marcia's name appeared in auction catalogues and society pages. Bennett Estate Artifact Surface. One headline read, "Another local woman revives historic property." Each word cut Gregory like glass. He stayed up nights scrolling, hands in his hair, watching his ex-wife's quiet rise against the backdrop of his collapse. His apartment shrank when the landlord served notice. His car was repossessed outside a diner. He sold his watch for cab fare. The man who once laughed, who once shrugged her off like dust, now stood in second-hand clothes, pockets empty. Every insult he had ever thrown at Marcia echoed back louder each time. Worthless nothing hellhole. He knew he had to see her, not for closure, for survival, and so he began rehearsing words he had never thought he'd say. "Please help me." The charity gala was held in the city's grandest hall, chandeliers dripping crystal light across polished marble floors. The air smelled faintly of roses and expensive cologne, punctuated by the clink of glasses and the hum of conversation. Marcia arrived in a gown the color of midnight, her braids pinned back, her children beside her, Lee in a simple emerald dress, Caleb in a crisp suit. They didn't look like survivors of some hell-hole, they looked like legacy itself. Cameras flashed as they stepped onto the carpet. Guests whispered, "Is that her?" Someone asked, "The one who restored the Bennett land." Another replied, "I heard she unearthed treasures worth millions." A third voice chimed in. The gossip swirled around them, but Maka kept her chin steady, a calm smile fixed in place. Across the room, Gregory lingered by the entrance, tugging at the sleeves of a suit that no longer fit him. His shoes scuffed, his tie borrowed, his face pale under the golden lights. No mistress clung to his arm. No investors circled him. He was alone, reduced to the very shadow of the man who once laughed in marble lobbies. He hesitated, swallowing hard before weaving through the crowd toward Marcia. Each step carried the weight of debts, shame, and desperation. When he finally reached her, his voice cracked like glass under pressure. "Marcia, please, I've lost everything." His hands trembled, palms open like a beggar's. "You have to help me, just alone, just enough to get back on my feet." For a moment, silence wrapped the table. Even the nearby violinist faltered. Guests turned, eyes wide, their whispers sharp as needles. Phones tilted up, recording. The public humiliation he had once served her was now mirrored back in a cruel spotlight. Lee's hand brushed against her mother's arm, steadying her. Caleb leaned close, his small jaw tight with memory. Marcia exhaled slowly, the way she had in the courthouse months ago. She looked at Gregory, at the man who had once mocked her, tossed her away, and laughed as he gave her nothing. Now he stood hollow, his arrogance stripped, begging in front of the children he had abandoned. Her voice was soft, but it carried across the hall. "I already helped you once, Gregory. I gave my loyalty, my labor, my love. You threw all of it away. The farmhouse you called worthless saved us. And now," she paused, her eyes steady, "now it's saving me from ever needing you again." A ripple of gasps swept through the room. Gregory's mouth opened, but no words came. Security stepped closer, discreet but firm, sensing his unraveling. Maka turned to her children. "Come," she said gently, guiding them toward the stage where donors were being honored. Applause rose as they ascended, drowning out Gregory's broken mutterings. From the corner, he watched as the spotlight found her, as her name was announced, as the very society that once whispered behind her back now celebrated her resilience. And when the final applause thundered, one truth rang louder than all the gossip. The farmhouse he had mocked as her downfall had become her empire, and Gregory Bennett, who once laughed at her pain, was left to choke on the echo of his own arrogance. Justice had arrived, not with revenge, but with her rise. The underdog had not only survived, she had triumphed. If you think Marcia's rise was satisfying, wait until you hear the next story where betrayal turns into the sweetest revenge. Don't miss it. Hit subscribe now and join us for more untold twists where the underdog always rises.